All right, welcome to the Advanced Concepts section of Module 3, Closeout and Evaluation. So here's where we are. You've already built a solid foundation. You know the frameworks, the contracts, and the basic rules. That's great. But now we're going to take all of that and crank up the complexity, because that's exactly what NCARB does on the actual exam. They don't just ask you to define a term, they give you a scenario with competing priorities and ask you to pick the best move. We've got 15 slides ahead of us, broken into 5 sections, and each one is designed to push your thinking from, I know the concept, to, I can apply it under pressure. So let's preview what's coming. Section 4.1 tackles complex closeout scenarios. Phased closeout, partial occupancy, conditional acceptance. Section 4.2 tackles claims after completion, latent defects, statute of repose, insurance claims. Section 4.3 tackles building performance, energy benchmarking, M and V, continuous commissioning. Section 4.4 tackles lessons learned, project retrospectives, knowledge management, firm improvement. Section 4.5 tackles sustainability closeout, lead documentation, green building certifications, ongoing compliance. Here's the thing about these topics. This is where most candidates lose points on the exam. Not because the material is inherently harder, but because the questions require judgment, not just recall. You can't memorize your way through these. You've got to think through scenarios, weigh competing interests, and pick the best answer when multiple options seem reasonable. So let's start building that skill right now. Large projects are often completed in phases, each requiring its own closeout process. Each phase may have its own date of substantial completion, its own punch list, and its own warranty period. This phased closeout challenges table addresses the complexities of closing out a project that was delivered in multiple phases. Each phase may have its own substantial completion date, warranty start date, and retainage schedule. The architect must track each phase independently while coordinating the overall project closeout. Systems that span multiple phases may not be fully commissioned until the final phase is complete, creating gaps in warranty coverage. Here's the key insight. Each designated portion of the work can have its own certificate of substantial completion. The contract must clearly define the designated portions. Without clear definitions, disputes over what constitutes a phase are common. This occupied renovation closeout table identifies the unique challenges of closing out work in a building that remained occupied during construction. Punch list items may need to be completed during off hours to avoid disrupting occupants. Commissioning must verify that existing systems were not impaired by the renovation. And documentation must distinguish between pre-existing conditions and new work to properly allocate warranty responsibilities. Defining substantial completion in renovations. In occupied renovations, the definition of intended purpose for substantial completion can be ambiguous. The contract should specifically define what constitutes substantial completion for each work zone or phase. Contractors go silent at closeout more often than anyone wants to admit. Final payment incentivizes completion, but once the contractor decides the remaining punch list is not worth the effort, or once they are having cash flow problems on a newer project, the job just stops. The punch list stays undone, phone calls go unanswered, and the owner is left with an 80% complete closeout that cannot move forward. A201 provides a specific escalation ladder for this situation. Each step preserves the owner's rights and documents the contractor's failure to perform. Skip steps or move too aggressively, and the legal position weakens. The architect's job is to guide the owner through the sequence: written notice, reasonable time, remedy selection, documentation, so that whatever remedy is ultimately chosen stands up to legal challenge. This table presents the owner's options when the contractor fails to complete closeout requirements. The owner can withhold final payment and retainage until all items are complete. The owner can complete the work and back-charge the contractor. The owner can draw on the performance bond if the contractor defaults. And the owner can pursue claims through the A201 dispute resolution process. The architect's role is to document the deficiencies and certify when requirements are met. Termination is a last resort. Terminating a contractor for cause during closeout is expensive and legally risky. If the termination is later found to be improper, it converts to a termination for convenience, and the owner may owe the contractor additional compensation. A201 requires strict procedural steps: written notice, cure period, certified mail, and failing any of them can invalidate the termination. The surety claim is often the right move. On bonded projects, notifying the surety of the contractor's default is often more effective than terminating. The surety has its own incentive to compel the contractor to finish or to hire a replacement at the surety's expense. Start with a written notice of default to both contractor and surety. This often produces action without the legal risk of termination. Here's the key insight. Documentation is everything. Before backcharging, making surety claims, or terminating, the architect and owner must document written notices, reasonable cure time, failure to respond, cost of completion by others. Without this paper trail, legal remedies weaken or fail. Closeout is when most payment disputes come to a head. The contractor wants all retainage released immediately. The owner wants every deficiency corrected before releasing a dollar. Each side has legitimate concerns. The contractor needs cash flow, the owner needs leverage, and the gap between them is where the architect must make decisions that directly determine how money moves. Under A201 Section 4.2, the architect is the initial decision maker for payment disputes. The architect's certification of the amount due in the final certificate for payment is the contractual mechanism for resolving disputes. This is not an administrative role. It is a quasi-judicial function, and the architect's decisions can be challenged but carry significant weight. This common retainage disputes table identifies the areas where owners and contractors most frequently disagree during closeout. Contractors argue for early retainage release based on substantially complete work. Owners resist release until all punch list items are done. The percentage held and the conditions for release should be clearly defined in the contract. The architect's certification of completion drives the release schedule. Retainage must be proportional. The owner cannot withhold $500,000 in retainage to leverage completion of $30,000 in punch list work. A201 allows retainage proportional to the cost of completing the remaining work, typically with a modest multiplier. Excessive retainage is a breach of contract and opens the owner to a contractor claim. Here's the key insight. The architect plays a crucial role in retainage disputes as the initial decision maker under A201 Section 4.2. The architect's certification of the amount due in the final certificate for payment is the contractual mechanism for resolving payment disputes, and both parties are bound by it unless they escalate through mediation and binding dispute resolution. Delay claims and consequential damages are the highest dollar disputes at closeout. A contractor who lost weeks to owner-caused delays wants compensation for extended general conditions, crew demobilization, and lost productivity. An owner whose building was delivered 3 months late wants compensation for lost rental income, lost business revenue, and delayed opening costs. These are all legitimate claims in theory, but A201 Section 15.1.7 changes the landscape dramatically. A201 Section 15.1.7 is a mutual waiver of consequential damages. Both owner and contractor waive claims for consequential damages against each other. The owner cannot recover lost rental income. The contractor cannot recover lost profits on other projects. This is one of the most heavily tested concepts on the CE exam because it is counterintuitive. Candidates expect damages to flow freely, and the waiver surprises them. This types of closeout claims table categorizes the claims that most commonly arise during the closeout phase. Delay claims from contractors seeking additional time and compensation. Defective work claims from owners seeking correction. Back-charge disputes over punch list completion costs. Retainage release disputes over timing and conditions. And consequential damages claims from either party. Understanding these claim types helps you identify the correct resolution process on the exam. This A201 Section 15.1.7 Waive Damages Table explains the mutual waiver of consequential damages in the standard AIA contract. Both owner and contractor waive the right to claim consequential damages from each other. The owner waives claims for lost revenue, loss of use, and similar indirect damages. The contractor waives claims for lost profits, lost business opportunity, and similar indirect damages. This waiver is one of the most significant risk allocation provisions in the contract and is frequently tested. Liquidated damages are not consequential. The mutual waiver of consequential damages does not waive liquidated damages. Liquidated damages are a specific per-day amount defined in the contract for late completion. They are recoverable. The waiver covers indirect losses, lost rent, lost profits, not contractually specified direct damages. Here's the key insight. The mutual waiver of consequential damages, A201, Section 15.1.7, is heavily tested. The owner waives claims for lost rental income, lost business profits, etc. The contractor waives claims for lost profits on other projects, principal office overhead, etc. Liquidated damages and direct damages are not waived. A201 establishes a specific, sequential claims resolution process. Parties cannot skip steps. The architect makes an initial decision under Section 15.2. If either party rejects that decision, they must proceed to mediation under Section 15.3, which is a condition precedent to any binding dispute resolution. Only after mediation fails can the parties proceed to arbitration, or litigation if the contract specifies it. Work continues throughout the process. Neither party can stop performance pending resolution. This A201 Claims Resolution Steps table outlines the formal dispute resolution process. Initial decision by the architect as the first neutral evaluator. Mediation as the required next step before litigation. Then arbitration or litigation as specified in the contract. Each step must be completed before escalating to the next. The architect's initial decision is binding unless appealed through mediation. Understanding this escalation sequence is essential for claims questions. The 21-day claim deadline. Under A201, Section 15.1.3, claims must be initiated within 21 days of the event giving rise to the claim, or the claimant's first recognition of it. Claims made after this period may be waived entirely. At closeout, events happen fast. Missed deadlines are a common way that otherwise valid claims die before they can be asserted. Here's a memory device. Initial decision, mediation, binding resolution. 3 steps in order. Skip mediation and the arbitration gets stayed. Miss the 21-day initiation deadline and the claim itself may be waived. Here's the key insight. Mediation is a condition precedent to arbitration or litigation under A201. If a party skips mediation and goes directly to arbitration, the arbitration may be dismissed or stayed until mediation occurs. The process is sequential, and the sequence is mandatory. This POE Levels of Investigation table describes 3 tiers of post-occupancy evaluation from basic to comprehensive. Level 1 is a walkthrough evaluation with visual inspection and occupant interviews. Level 2 adds performance monitoring with data collection on energy, comfort, and system operation. Level 3 is a detailed technical assessment with engineering analysis and forensic evaluation of specific systems. The appropriate level depends on the building type, budget, and the questions being investigated. This list identifies the core data categories that every post-occupancy evaluation should address. Building performance including energy use, thermal comfort, lighting quality, and acoustics. Occupant satisfaction covering workspace functionality, environmental quality, and overall experience. Operational efficiency addressing maintenance costs, system reliability, and staff requirements. And design effectiveness, evaluating whether the building meets the original program requirements. Here's the key insight. The most common mistake in POE is conducting it too soon. A minimum of 6 months after occupancy is recommended to allow occupants to settle in and for seasonal performance data to accumulate. This key performance metrics table lists the specific measurements used to evaluate building performance after occupancy. Energy use intensity in BTU per square foot per year. Thermal comfort measured by ASHRAE 55 standards. Lighting levels compared to IES recommendations. Indoor air quality measured against ASHRAE 62.1 ventilation rates. And acoustic performance compared to background noise criteria. Each metric has an established benchmark that the building should meet or exceed. Here's the key insight. Energy use intensity, EUI, is the primary metric for comparing building energy performance. Measured in kBTU per square foot per year, it allows comparison across different building sizes. Lower EUI equals better performance. This evidence-based design cycle table shows how post-occupancy evaluation feeds back into future design decisions. Performance data from occupied buildings informs design criteria for new projects. Occupant feedback identifies what works and what does not. Operational data reveals maintenance and energy cost realities versus design assumptions. And lessons learned documentation captures institutional knowledge. This feedback loop is how the profession improves over time. Evidence-based design is particularly important in healthcare, education, and workplace design, where occupant outcomes, patient recovery, student performance, worker productivity, can be directly measured and linked to design decisions. Here's the key insight. POE is not just about evaluating one building. It is about creating a knowledge base that improves all future projects. Firms that systematically collect and apply POE data produce measurably better buildings over time. The most dangerous misconception in professional practice: that the architect's liability ends when the project finishes. It does not. Construction claims are most commonly filed 3 to 5 years after project completion, not during design or construction. A hidden waterproofing defect, a latent structural issue, a code compliance gap that only surfaces during a renovation years later. These all trigger claims that land on the architect's desk long after the final invoice was paid. The architect's post-completion exposure is bounded by 2 statutes: the Statute of Limitations, how long after discovering a defect can you sue, and the Statute of Repose, absolute cutoff regardless of discovery. Both vary by state. Both can extend the architect's liability well beyond what most practitioners assume. The architect who cancels professional liability insurance after the project finishes is the architect who discovers, 3 years later, that they have no defense when the claim arrives. This post-completion liability timeline table shows the overlapping legal exposure periods after project completion. The 1-year correction period provides contractual recourse for the first year. Professional liability insurance must remain in force during the Statute of Limitations and Statute of Repose periods. The Statute of Limitations runs from discovery of a defect, and the Statute of Repose provides an absolute cutoff regardless of discovery. Architects must maintain insurance coverage through all these periods. Insurance must continue through the Repose period. The architect must maintain professional liability insurance for the entire period of potential exposure, not just during design and construction. Switching to a new claims-made policy without matching retroactive dates can leave years of past work uninsured. Retiring architects must either keep the policy in force or buy tail coverage, extended reporting period, to cover the repose period. Here's the key insight. The architect's liability exposure extends 6 to 15 years past substantial completion, and claims typically arrive 3 to 5 years after the project finishes. Maintain records, maintain insurance, and understand that the real liability window is the statute of repose, not the contract's warranty period. Statutes of limitations and statutes of repose are often confused because they both establish time limits, but they do fundamentally different things, and the difference matters enormously in construction defect cases. The statute of limitations gives the plaintiff a fixed window to file suit after discovering a defect. The statute of repose sets an absolute outer boundary after substantial completion, regardless of discovery. They can run simultaneously, and whichever expires first controls. The complication is the discovery rule that governs statutes of limitations in most states. The limitations clock does not start running until the plaintiff knew or should have known about the defect. A hidden design flaw could be discovered 12 years after construction, and the limitations clock starts then. In theory, that could create indefinite liability, which is exactly why states enacted statutes of repose to provide absolute cutoffs. This detailed comparison of statute of limitations versus statute of repose is critical exam material. The statute of limitations begins when the defect is discovered or should have been discovered, typically running 4 to 6 years. The statute of repose begins at substantial completion, regardless of discovery, typically running 6 to 15 years. The statute of repose is an absolute bar that cannot be extended by late discovery. Many exam questions test whether you know which clock starts when and which provides the ultimate cutoff. The discovery rule trap. In discovery rule states, the statute of limitations does not start until the defect is discovered or should have been discovered with reasonable diligence. A hidden design defect could be discovered 10 years after construction, and the statute of limitations clock starts then. Without a statute of repose, this could theoretically create indefinite liability. The statute of repose is the only absolute protection. It runs from substantial completion, regardless of when defects are discovered. Here's a memory device. Limitations equals clock starts at discovery. Can be delayed for years. Repose equals clock starts at substantial completion. Absolute, no delay. Whichever runs out first controls. Repose is always the outer boundary. Here's the key insight. The statute of repose is the architect's ultimate liability firewall. Know your state's repose period. It determines how long you must maintain records, how long you must maintain insurance, and how long your exposure runs. The statute of limitations can be extended by the discovery rule. The statute of repose cannot. At Project Closeout, most architects think about insurance renewals and document storage as administrative afterthoughts. They are not. These decisions determine whether the firm can defend itself when a claim arrives 5, 8, or 12 years later. The firms that survive post-completion claims are the firms that kept the records and maintained the insurance. The firms that do not settle because they cannot prove what they did and they cannot find coverage to defend it. The two disciplines are linked. Records prove what you did. Insurance pays to defend it when someone challenges what you did. Drop either one, and your post-completion liability becomes a cash out-of-pocket problem. This document retention requirements table specifies how long different project records should be maintained after completion. Contract documents should be retained through the statute of repose period, often 10 to 15 years. Correspondence and field reports should be kept for the same period. Financial records may have shorter requirements, but should align with the liability period. Insurance policies and certificates should be kept permanently. These retention periods are driven by potential litigation exposure. This list identifies the insurance rules that apply during the post-project period. Professional liability insurance must be maintained on a claims-made basis through the statute of repose period. The retroactive date on the policy must predate the start of services. Tail coverage may be needed if the architect changes insurers or retires. And the policy must cover all projects completed during the period, not just the most recent. Gaps in coverage can leave the architect personally exposed. Retroactive date gaps are the #1 insurance mistake. Claims-made policies only cover claims filed during the policy period for work done after the retroactive date. If you switch insurers and the new policy's retroactive date is set to today, all your past work is uninsured. Always negotiate the retroactive date to match the firm's project history, or buy a tail policy to cover the gap. Here's the key insight: the biggest insurance mistake at closeout: assuming coverage is no longer needed because the project is done. Professional liability claims most commonly arrive 3 to 5 years after project completion, not during construction. Keep the records, keep the coverage, and treat closeout as the start of a new exposure period, not the end. LEED certification requires extensive documentation during the closeout phase. Many LEED credits and prerequisites have specific submittal requirements that must be fulfilled before certification can be achieved. This LEED closeout documentation table identifies the sustainability-related documents required for green building certification at project completion. Energy modeling results compared to actual performance. Commissioning reports verifying system operation meets design intent. Material certifications documenting recycled content and regional sourcing. Indoor air quality testing results before occupancy. And a LEED-specific operations manual for the building's green systems. These documents are in addition to standard closeout requirements. Here's the key insight: LEED documentation must be collected throughout construction, not just at closeout. Waste diversion records, material submittals, and IAQ testing must be ongoing. Trying to compile everything at the end is a common cause of missed credits. This commissioning closeout requirements table identifies what the commissioning process must deliver at project completion. Functional performance test results for all commissioned systems. A systems manual describing the design intent and basis of design for each system. Training documentation for building operators. A commissioning report summarizing all findings and resolutions, and a deferred testing schedule for seasonal systems that cannot be tested during construction. Commissioning is not testing. It is verification that systems perform as intended. LEED prerequisite. Fundamental commissioning of building energy systems is a prerequisite, not a credit, for LEED certification. Without a completed commissioning report, LEED certification cannot be achieved, regardless of how many other credits are earned. This commissioning levels table describes 3 tiers of building commissioning. Basic commissioning covers HVAC and controls as required by energy codes like ASHRAE 90.1. Enhanced commissioning adds the building envelope, lighting controls, and renewable energy systems. And comprehensive whole building commissioning covers every system from plumbing to fire protection. LEED requires enhanced commissioning for higher certification levels. The level of commissioning should be specified during design, not decided during closeout. Here's the key insight. Enhanced commissioning requires the commissioning agent to be involved starting in the design phase, reviewing OPR and BOD, not just during construction. This early involvement catches design issues before they become expensive construction problems. OPR equals owner's project requirements, what the owner wants. BOD equals basis of design, how the design team intends to meet OPR. The CXA verifies that the BOD addresses the OPR and that construction meets the BOD. Let's bring it all together. You've just worked through the entire advanced layer of Construction and Evaluation Module 3, Closeout and Evaluation. That's a lot of material, so let's recap what you've learned and why it matters. Section 4.1, Complex Closeout. Phased closeout means multiple substantial completions. Partial occupancy splits risk between owner and contractor. Section 4.2, Post-completion claims. Latent defects surface after closeout. Statute of Repose sets the absolute deadline for construction claims. Section 4.3, Performance. M&V proves whether energy targets are met. Continuous commissioning keeps systems optimized over time. Section 4.4, Lessons learned. Project retrospectives capture what worked and what failed. Knowledge management turns one project into firm-wide improvement. Section 4.5, Sustainability. Lead closeout requires documentation well beyond the punch list. Ongoing compliance is the owner's responsibility. The thread connecting all of these sections is this. Construction and evaluation isn't about designing. It's about executing, administering, and closing out the project to make sure the owner gets what was promised. Get this right, and every phase from bidding through closeout runs smoother. Your next step is the Advanced Check Quiz. These questions are harder. They test application, not just recall. Take your time, read each option carefully, and use the explanations to refine your thinking. When you finish this, you'll have completed the full Module 3 content. You've built a solid foundation. Time to put it to the test.